You're listening to The Artist Athlete, episode 17, sweetie darling. This podcast is dedicated to circus. It's a place for professionals in the industry to share their stories, viewpoints, and information, and a place for outsiders to get information about this amazing art form. Hey friends, fans, and enemies. I'm Shannon McKenna, and I'm the host of the Artist Athlete podcast and the founder of theartistathlete.com. Since I don't want to have any advertising on this podcast that does not directly benefit circus arts or artists, the Artist Athlete podcast is currently sponsored only by listeners like you. I do this through patreon.com, which allows you to give a monthly donation for as little as $1 American, or an Australian dollar, or €1. But I do think there's a VAT tax on euros. But anyway, in exchange for becoming a Patreon, you get all sorts of cool Artist Athlete goodies, as well as early access to new episodes and the raw, uncut versions of some of my favorite interviews, like the one today. So, what are you waiting for? Go to patreon.com/theartistathlete and become a Patreon. Even if you have no intention of giving me money because you're a freeloader, at least go and check out the super dorky video I made. Again, it's www.patreon.com/theartistathlete. My guest today is aerial coach and choreographer Jenn Bruyer. Jenn has been immersed in aerial arts since 2008. She is driven by her focus on fabric or aerial silks, sling, hammock, and her first love, trapeze of all sorts. She also enjoys exploring corde lissé, cloud swing, lyra or aerial hoop, net, rope, and harness, and anything else someone puts in front of her. She has coached, choreographed, and performed all around the world, including in over 30 U.S. states, Italy, Austria, Canada, Mexico, and in Germany, where this interview was recorded. I do want to include that because I didn't have my normal setup, the sound is a little weird on this one, I know, but stick with it. It's a great interview, and I really enjoyed eating chocolate and talking to Jenn Bruyer. So, welcome to the show, Jenn. I just take a bite of chocolate. Cool. Yep. Can you say, in your own words, who you are and what you do?
My name is Jenn Bruyer. I am an aerial coach and sometimes still performer of that thing.
Nice.
Yes.
Where are you from?
I'm originally from Summers, Montana, population 300 people.
Wow.
But I've been living in Seattle off and on for the last 16 years.
Okay.
I think.
Cool. Yeah. Did you move from Montana to Seattle?
Yep, direct.
Wow.
Yep.
Nice.
Cool. I moved to Seattle to go to art school, which I did, and then just stuck around.
And you studied marketing?
I did, yeah. Graphic and industrial design. Nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
And did you work in that field forever?
Yeah. I started designing bicycles right out of college.
Bicycles?
Bicycles, yeah.
Cool.
Like BMX bikes.
Okay.
BMX and road bikes and mountain bikes and things like that. And yeah, I did that for a couple of years. And then I really got into, kind of got out of bike racing and I got into rock climbing. And that sort of became the thing that I did, and stuck with designing things and just practicing movement, kind of focusing on climbing, and started my own clothing line and did some stuff with that, like you do. Like you do.
And then when was your first encounter with the circus?
The circus. Yes. I was on a climbing trip, and I was like the ripe old age of 23, aging out and about to retire from that lifestyle
Of climbing?
Of climbing. And
I don't know anything about climbing. I have students who are climbers.
There's a lot of crossover between circus and climbing because it's like, I think it feeds the same desire for physicality in a lot of ways.
Sure.
You know, to go up and to be real high and to do stuff that's super, super hard. So I was like 23 and I was climbing pretty strong, but you know.
But you were aging out of it?
Like it was just like, I mean, I was blown a bunch of tendons and elbows and pushed myself super hard. So I was on a climbing trip and we took like a rest day and I saw someone performing on a trapeze in a show, and I had never seen that before. Like I knew what circus was, but it wasn't like anything that I had ever really looked into. And so I was like, oh, that's the thing I want to do. What's that thing? Like, that looks great. That looks like exactly what I like to do. So I went back to Seattle a few days later and I was just chatting to someone who I was completely unconnected to circus about this. And they said, oh, I have this friend who is, she's a trapeze artist, as it turns out. And she lives here in Seattle. And her name is Tamra, the trapeze lady. And I was like, well, that sounds right. So I met Tamra, the trapeze lady, who introduced me to a whole variety of other people, including my longtime friend and boss, Beverly Sobelman, who owns Versatile Arts in Seattle, Washington. And kind of the rest is history. I just started dinking around with circus. And was like, oh, this is great. Yeah, this is exactly what I should be doing. And it's like, it's really funny. Someone told me the other day, or I read somewhere, that every human has two really important days in their life. They have the day that they're born and the day that they realize what they're born to do.
Oh.
And that was the moment for, I've like really, really specifically remember like the kind of the culmination of that moment where I was like, I've done a lot of things, like dabbled in like, some dance and some pole dance, which is similar in a lot of ways, some climbing, which is similar in a lot of ways, and a lot of other things that were kind of fed into what.
Some people would even put pole dancing in the circus category.
Absolutely.
Would you?
I think it depends on the intention. You know, like I think that there's really such a thing as like entertainment pole and sport pole. I mean, it's like we get into semantics at that point. It's like saying, what's the difference between acrobatic aerial work and aerial dance?
Yeah.
You know, like it's this huge gray area.
Yeah.
And I think that that's totally okay. You know, like you can be a practitioner of all of those styles and just lean in whatever direction is necessary for your work or your emotional state. Or just whatever you feel like doing, you know? And and everyone's style kind of like leads them in a certain direction or their desire to practice something specific. But yeah, I just messed around with a whole lot of things and then really kind of hit on what felt really good at the time. And you know when you found a thing that is the right thing for you, because everything starts to kind of come together.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, this like I went to art school. I understand how to visually construct things. So that was helpful. And I was really fit because my whole life I just moved through different activities. So that was really helpful. I had really nice lines from doing other things that were not circus related. And that was really helpful. You know, and so it's like, it was really kind of, even, like everything really kind of came together in my life personally. Even my design degree, just the ability to organize visual elements in a meaningful way helps me build work for other people, and myself, which is, you know, kind of really where I got into what it is that I do now and what I feel like I've become really good at now is helping other people craft that voice, you know, like helping them arrange the tools that they already have and collect more tools and isolate what those tools are. So.
Do you have a process for doing that?
Oh, yeah. I definitely have a process. I think I have a process for everything. I have a process for how I make my coffee in the morning, like assess how I'm going to go about my day. Like, I am a super organized person. And it's funny that you asked that because I feel like I answer that question and a whole variety of other questions in the exact same way. Like talking about like all types of art. Like I like to practice all types of art. I love visual art and performance art and just creating all sort of like whatever I kind of want to explore at the time. But my process for building work is always the same. Like, and it's super, super analytical. It's like, all very based on like an internal charting, like the inside of my brain, like you've seen my terrifying schedule.
Oh my God, it's horrifying.
Yeah. And I love that. I love when my life looks like this really abstract stacking game of Tetris, because I feel like I operate really well like that. You know, maybe I don't operate so well with a lot of like loose, nebulous space and time and ideas. But if I take all of these different things and I arrange them all together in kind of a tight way, I feel like that works really well for me. So like speaking to that point, like how do I go about constructing work? And it's super, super method based. It's, collect all of the things that you have. And I ask all of the questions, like the who, what, why, where, and how, and like I write it all out. I'm a super huge fan of whiteboarding. Like whenever someone's like, oh, can you help me work on this project? I'm like, great, go get a whiteboard. Oh, you don't have one. Go get a whiteboard. And then we'll start. You know, it's okay. Like, because I love not being attached to anything. Like you can just erase it and start over. But also being able to like I've super visually organize everything. It's like charting. It's like a spreadsheet. It's great. You know, you can just write it all out and then let go of it and write it, you know, and like just keep working through that process. But yeah, I like, it's almost like I start with a huge bullet pointed list of everything that goes into creating intention. And then just start crossing things off the list that aren't important. Mm-hmm. And you really like, I feel like I'm really able to like get down to like kind of find what's important. But every project is totally different. My process is always the same. It's kind of hard to describe in words, again, because I'm a really visual person. Sure. But if you can envision a matrices, which is my favorite word to use for organizing elements of any practice, you can envision a matrices like I talk about this a lot when I'm teaching too, and sourcing movement, and organizing theory around movement is like maybe one side of your matrices has all of the stuff, like, you know, an aerial, to be really specific and just assign an example, it's like you've got hip key, and then on the other side of your matrices you've got I climb into this thing, I go under this thing, I split my fabric, or, you know, I do like any of the various whatever you would apply to that, to just kind of source through stuff. And the same, I think, creating like work too, like making, whether it's like you're talking about the architecture of something, like putting actual skills together, is all the same process. I'm like, well, what are all the things that you want to do? Like, oh, I want to go up and I want to go down. Well, here are all the ways that I can do that, you know, or I want to stay in place, or I want to demonstrate the skill for myself, and like charting through this huge process with like all of these different things, and then just crossing out the things that don't feel like they apply to what your real goal is.
How much in all of this charting and matrices working do you include the audience?
Well, I think that's like one of the first questions you ask is, who is your audience?
Sure.
You know, because that helps drive the conversation. Because if your audience could be anything. It's like, my audience is my peers. You know, this is an audition. It's a panel of experts. Or my audience is a corporate client. My audience is, you know, like whatever it is. And like that drives the entire conversation. It's like, I feel like having been a person who has gone to like a commercial technical school and built a career around the idea of creating a service, I look at everything from the client viewpoint, you know, and maybe the client is internal or the client is external, right? So maybe sometimes you're the client too, like, right? Like, so sometimes I get asked to present something like, Jen, we'd like you to be in this show. And it's like, just me. We'd like you to be in the show. And I say, great. What do you want me to do? What's important to you? Like, what's the show all about? Like, what? And I ask all of like the questions that are like immediately in that bullet pointed list of my super over organized brain. And they're like, oh, it doesn't matter. And then of course that's like panic inducing for someone who charts and, you know, labels everything. And I'm like, so that immediately makes me the client. And I'm like, well, I get to do whatever I want. It's just it's a rarity. That's a rarity. Yeah. It's a rarity and a luxury. And also crippling sometimes too, when there are too many things to think about. But like, so maybe I'm the client and I say, well, what do I want to do? What do I want to show? What do I want to, or I think what's more important is, what do I want to explore? How do I want to spend my time? And then, like that drives the conversation. Or sometimes the client is like, is like corporate work. Like, I'm going to go work for Microsoft. And I'm like, oh, I immediately know what's important for that client because I've done that a lot,
Yeah.
And I just go through the huge list of things and cross off all the things that aren't important, and highlight the things that are important and begin assembling something in a logical way, based on the importance of that client's needs, like what they're really looking for,
Yeah, and I think that's also what makes you a coach that people trust.
Yeah.
It seems like. Is because you're very good at assessing students. Do you call your students clients as well, or
no?
Your clients students? Or
I mean, I would say like if I lumped
word to me.
Well, yeah. I mean, you can use whatever word you want. It's like I would say that all of my students are like that's like a client base, but like individually, everyone are just people.
Yeah.
So which is by and large the reason that I love what I do. When I was performing, and that was what I did for work.
Who did you perform with?
I did a lot of corporate work. I worked with a couple of performance companies. Mm-hmm. I was living mostly in Seattle.
Yeah.
So you know what that life's like.
Oh yeah. I don't. I've actually never been to Seattle, but I know the living in a big city, doing the hustle. Yeah. I got that.
So that was kind of that work. But then when I found teaching, I realized the thing that was missing, that was not that I wasn't happy about, that I didn't feel really filled up by, and it was that exact word. When I stopped thinking about people like their clients and I'm booking work, and I started thinking about working with people and building relationships. And I mean, we talk about that all the time too, in a business sense. Like, I work for studios all over the world, and especially in the US. And so like I might say like, oh, these are clients, and I'm like trying to bring good products to clients, like teach good workshops and create great immersive experiences, and I treat all of those, I treat everyone with the same level of respect. And so like, that's a great word to use for that. Like, I really feel like I respect all of the studios that I work for, because I mean, that's the work that I do. And I treat my work, and
when you kind of work for yourself, you don't want to work for people you don't respect. And you have the option.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do the work that you respect.
Sometimes.
Or with the people you respect.
Yeah, you would hope so. I mean, that's the dream. The dream is that you get to pick who you work with, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's actually really that's a really important thing to remember too. Like for me in particular, and that's kind of what I was just saying, is when I was working as a performer more regularly, I felt really disconnected from my work because I was making work for clients. And I was kind of fitting in. And what I never really felt, and everyone has a different experience, which is what I love about everyone getting to kind of find their own way in such a varied and vibrant industry, is I never felt really connected to my work because I was making, I wasn't really connecting with the people. Like I was like, oh, I go on stage and I do the thing. I walk out from behind the curtain, and then I walk away, and I probably never see those people again. And I go to another city, or, I go to another gig. And sometimes you really get to connect in a meaningful way, but it always felt like it was the same connection for me. It was this connection of, oh, it was so beautiful. It was so da 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 da, and it felt really surface level to me. And I was really missing that close connection, that like long-term relationship building. And even though I built a lot of relationships with clients, it was all really about delivering the material and not connecting on a more personal level. So when I discovered my love of teaching, that was the thing that really clicked. It wasn't just the activity that I was doing and how my whole life had felt like it had culminated into this, like this is the thing I should be doing. Like, this is what my body wants to do. This is what my brain and my emotional state really wants to continue to explore. Like, that was always there in any style of the work, like whatever I was doing with it, even if I was just stage managing and helping other people like feel successful and, whatever it is. But when I found teaching, what I discovered was, connecting with people in a meaningful way and kind of helping them not just like become better practitioners, you know, of the activity that they were coming to me for coaching for, which is, I mean, great. Like I love teaching straight up. Like if you just want to say it in a really, really simple way, I love to teach people to do things. Yeah. If I know how to do a thing, I will be happy to teach you how to do it. Like I don't hold on to anything for myself ever unless I feel like it is not ready to be shared with other people. And sometimes that is a thing. But even then, I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen next, but this is a really fun thing to explore conceptually. Like, I think I'm most driven by that. And it's that connection with people and being able to have an intellectual and emotional discourse with people. Whereas I felt like when I was just training and performing, I didn't get that thing. So I felt really disconnected from the work. But now I feel really, really connected to the work because I get to continue to explore things. And I still do the same question asking and the same organization of information and say, like, well, what is it? Like, who is the client? To use that word again, you know, for consistency, like say, like, who's the client? Oh, it's my students. You know, my students aren't just clients. They're friends and they're collaborators and they're just people that I want to spend my time around. And I feel like that is true of nearly every single person I've ever worked with. Like we all intersect in a really interesting way, especially in a student-teacher relationship where it is really, really fun to be a part of someone's process. Like I think we're all, to a varying degree, we like to help other people and feel included and feel asked to do things and feel like we're a part of stuff. Like that's part of the human condition. For me, teaching is that thing in the absolute best sense. That's exactly how I like to do it. I like to feel like I'm helping people, also feel like I'm a part of the thing that they do for fun. That is what is like this extreme luxury in my life is sometimes I like to think that I'm the best part of some people's weeks. like that sounds kind of funny to say out loud, but it's really true. It's like, you know, like whether we're professional or we're practicing this activity of circus arts on a recreational level, like whatever it is, like I really want to bring the energy into people's lives that is fulfilling and enriching and like, oh, that's the thing I look forward to, whether it's a class or it's a lesson or it's a critique. Like I want to bring a really, really, a really beautiful time to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what, it's not just about sharing what I like to do. It's about helping other people craft that. Because there's a little bit of me in all of that too. And I get so filled up by that. I super, super love it. Also, it's really nice to not have to be a contortionist. It's really nice not to have to catch pirouettes. It's really nice not to have to do a lot of things.
You just help other people do it.
I get to help other people do it. Yeah. And like, you know, yeah, that's great. That's what I want to do.
This podcast is brought to you by The Artist Athlete. Did you know that The Artist Athlete is more than just a podcast? It's a growing online resource for students of the aerial arts to deepen their journey to badassery by accessing techniques approved by physical therapists and master coaches in the industry. Our current spotlight is on the fundamentals of aerial alignment, a practical manual for hanging upside down. This online manual is a step-by-step guide. It is complete with photos, videos, and exercises that you can implement immediately to help you gain the strength and awareness you need for an aerial practice that promotes shoulder health and longevity and good posture upright, so you don't walk around like a gorilla. But don't just take my word for it. Here's circus physical therapist Dr. Jenn Crane of Cirque Physio to tell you more.
The fundamentals of aerial alignment is an absolute must-have for every aerialist of every level. I can't even tell you how many shoulder injuries I treat that are a direct result of rushing past the basics in an attempt to get a trick too soon. In the manual, Shannon deconstructs the fundamentals, including the correct muscular engagement to safely arrive in these positions and the rationale for why it matters. Of course, in addition to all of these fabulous pearls of wisdom, the book is also ridiculously fun to read. It's been lovingly garnished with the Shannon humor we all know and love.
Thanks, Jen. Cirque Physio is also featured in the book to give scientific insight into why it all works. Pick up your copy today by going to theartistathlete.com and clicking e-manuals. Listeners of the podcast can get a 10% discount by typing in the offer code PODCAST at checkout. Again, that's theartistathlete.com, offer code podcast. Now, back to the show. You mentioned earlier, like, you get this email all the time. So we may as well just expose the secret, because we both do this.
This is my big secret.
How do you travel and teach workshops,
How
Jen?
do you travel
How do
and
you do
teach it? Yeah. Travel and teach workshops. How does that happen? How can I do that for myself? Well, what an interesting question. So I started traveling and teaching workshops. I want to say, and now somebody could call me out on this if they actually remember the first workshop that I ever taught.
No one can, because we're the only people here.
It's true. Yeah. So I'm just going to like throw out some numbers and guess that maybe this was like 6 years ago, 5 years ago, somewhere around there, where I was like, oh, I'm going to be, and literally it was this really, like all things that should happen, it was a relatively organic process.
Yeah.
And I was in a place for a different reason. Oh, it's kind of like how I'm in Munich, Germany right now for a wedding. I think I was somewhere for a wedding because you people keep getting married. So I have to like travel to these weddings.
So that's how you become a traveling instructor. Have a lot of friends in a lot of different places
who get married. And then eventually you're like, hey, I would love to pay for my trip. And I offer this information. Yeah. I teach these ideas, whether they're skills or concepts in movement or whatever it is. I teach these things. And I was like, oh, I could probably teach this where I'm going. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know what is really awesome about that is you get to do the same thing, like the thing that you are crafting, that you are good at, that you practice all the time, that you are super into, with a whole new population of people. So you get to make new friends and you get to make new connections. And I was like, oh, this is brilliant. And you learn so much from what they're doing too. Yes, I love learning from, I learn by watching my students all of the time. And not just by watching what they're doing or like the continual interaction, sharing material, but listening to questions, like really, really listening to what people, what people need and seeing what they're excited about. Yeah. Like that has made me a much better practitioner of this activity. Really anything. It's like, you can't beat experience. There's no substitution for experiencing something and practicing that thing. And the thing that I practice all of the time is communication. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Communicating ideas effectively and building stuff to communicate with people, whether it's just, amassing a collection of information to share in a workshop setting or creating new ways to say the same thing to achieve a better result. Which is such an important part of teaching, I think, is finding different ways to communicate the same information. Yeah, because if we all said the same thing, one, that just wouldn't be super exciting, but you'd only be able to really get through to a certain level. Like everyone having a different voice is what, like I will, this is like this is like not new information for anyone, but it's like, I'll sit around and be talking with another instructor all the time and like say, I'll come in and I'll teach a workshop and they'll be like, God, I've shown them that thing 30 times and they couldn't do it until you came and said the exact same thing that I say. And I'm like, yeah, well, so, you loosened the lid on the jar a little bit for sure. But it's like, sometimes it's like just a different voice is so good. Like I love when my students that I work with regularly work with other people who are similar to me or really, really different from me, or just anyone. Just go work with more people. Just hang out with more people, listen to more people, interact with more people. Because it's not really about me or you as the teachers. It's about the person who is doing the listening and how they're listening. And really like a combination of so many things, because we're all like individually like a list of ingredients. Like you're a list of ingredients, Shannon. I'm a list of ingredients. And sometimes when you combine those ingredients together, they make a really tasty recipe. And sometimes they don't. No. And sometimes it's like pretty good. It's like, it's good enough that I'm going to... Hold on. Can we go back to this metaphor? So wait, in this metaphor, what are the ingredients? Oh, like, are you talking about in the aerial work? Yeah. So I'm making a real metaphor here and saying I'm thinking about baking a cake. Yeah, we don't want a fake metaphor. Totally. No, we're going heaps real here. Heaps real, bro. Heaps, bro. So say I'm the flour and I'm the egg and I'm also the water and you're the sugar. obviously here. And, you know, like whatever else goes into a cake. I don't make food, by the way, so I should probably find a different metaphor than this because I can only go so deep.
So you have sugar, flour, water.
Yeah.
Wait, you have water, flour, egg, and I have sugar.
Yeah. But if like...
And then how do I do a hip key roll up from that?
Yeah. So it's like, well, like maybe what I have to add to what you have already. Or how you is like the right combination of things to bake the cake. And sometimes it's not like, you know, sometimes you interact with a person and you're like, I know you're an awesome person, but I just can't. It's like I'm not hearing what you're saying, or I have a hard time being around you. Or
do you ever have, and you don't have to name names, but have you ever had experiences when you're traveling like that, where you just go to a studio and you're like, this is just not.
Oh yeah. So it's like, so sometimes, and this is where I'm kind of trying to tie this back in, I'll go to a place or I'll interact with a population of people or an individual person. And I'm like, it's just not the day for this. You showed up tired. I showed up jet lagged. You showed up overbooked, overworked, or injured. You know, and we just can't have the right conversation. We can't do the thing that you want to do or the thing that I think is important for you to do because it isn't the right timing. You know, we're at the wrong elevation. I'm baking it at the wrong temperature. And so for me as a coach, I have to be able to dynamically correct that and say, and this happens all the time. And this is what makes a really good, not just coach, but a good creator of space. You know, is your ability to just look at a room of people or an individual person and know how to ask the right questions. Be like, is this, or like know what the answer to the question is before you ask it. Like maybe I don't have to say, oh, you guys look like this is too hard. We're going to do a different thing. You know, like I know that. I've done that.
Where does that ability come from? Do you think it's experience?
Experience.
Do you think it's something innate?
Yeah. So I think it's a combination of things. There's no substitute for experience. The more you do a thing, the more you'll understand about a thing. But also some people are really good. And, you know, and when I say experience too, like, I don't want to say like, oh, some people are just really naturally gifted at teaching or whatever. Like you're empathic in some way. Like that's like, maybe that's true. I can't tell you if that's true. I don't really know. But I can say that I practice listening to people. You know, like I also practice that thing. It's not like I'm just always out there practicing teaching or practicing skills. Like I'm also practicing reading a room and responding to people. Like I'm not.
That's so interesting. I even like remember like sitting at brunch today. You were quiet and back, and I can see you doing that at times.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that you were conscious of the fact that you were doing that.
Oh yeah, I feel like I'm super conscious. Like, and I also feel like I've gotten pretty good anymore, like interacting with a lot of different people a lot at like I'm faster at that.
Traveling makes that.
Yeah, like you could, like I can sit down. Yeah, I can sit down in a room full of people, whether I'm at a party or we're out at brunch or I'm teaching, and be like, I can kind of feel energetically where I fit in with this. And you know, like, you know how it is. Whenever you do something new, you feel a bit nervous about it. But then whenever you walk into a place for the first time, you step out on stage that you've never been on before.
I love
and
that
never
energy, actually.
Yeah, it's great. It's great because it like heightens your awareness. Yep. Like you don't get complacent. And when you live in that state all of the time, like you get really used to it and you get fast at responding. It's like conditioning anything else.
Do you prefer teaching workshops to session or classes?
I like both. I like everything. I really do. I love everything. I know. But let me dig into it a little bit. I like teaching workshops because I'm like the fun aunt. Or like, you know, like your grandma who comes to town once a year and just feeds you candy. That's my job. And I know what my job is. Like I'm real clear on it. I'm not drilling you on that same skill that is so frustrating for a really long time until you finally get it. But you know, like that reward is also equally amazing.
I love that metaphor. Sorry to interrupt, but I love that metaphor of like, and it goes back to what we were talking about before, maybe about how, you know, you have coaches who will be like, I said that same thing over and over.
Oh, yeah.
again.
Yeah,
you know?
totally.
And just like your parent would say the same thing over and over again.
I keep saying this to you.
But if your fun aunt came in and said it to you.
Sometimes
like,
you listen to your fun aunt. Yeah, it's totally true.
Totally
and
love
like,
my fun aunt.
I love being the fun aunt and not the parent. So in my real life, I am the fun aunt and I'm not the parent. So maybe I lean a little bit harder in that direction. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, everybody likes to have fun, right?
What do you mean your real life?
In my real life, I'm a fun aunt.
Oh, like you have brothers and sisters who have children.
Yeah. Yeah.
This isn't a metaphor anymore.
No, we're now talking about my real life. I have a nephew who, for his second birthday, I bought him a skateboard. I was like, that might be excessive for a 2-year-old. I thought it was an awesome present. So, and he also loved it. But again, kind of talking about relationships with people, I love teaching long-term classes, session-based things, things that we explore for a really, really long time and work on for a really, really long time, because you build a really beautiful bond with people when you are in that role, in that place in their life, or in any place in anyone's life for a long time. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I love both of those things. But like again, like let's look at my life. Like I don't have any actual kids or, like a meaningful relationship or anything like that. So it's like I probably lean in that workshop direction pretty heavy. But maybe have some sort of commitment fears somewhere in there. But I like both of those things. Like they're both really great.
Yeah. You bring up a really interesting point about the touring, traveling lifestyle or the workshop lifestyle that I try to explain to people a lot, is that I don't own a bed. Like these kinds of things where people are like, how do you just travel all the time? It's like, well,
when you don't have anything to go home to.
Exactly.
It's pretty easy to not go home.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really true. And, like we've been talking these last couple days that we've been together about finding balance a little bit. And balance is like this moving target. And, it's like such a luxury that my balance has a moving target, right? And I'm not just like a farmer trying to make ends meet my entire life. It's not like the same goal over and over again. Like I have this really amazing experience where like, right now, I really want to be doing a thing, and maybe in 6 months or a year or 5 years, what I want to be doing is going to change, and I'm going to change my life as a result of that. So like right now, my balance is different than it will be in 5 years. I'm absolutely certain of that. Like, right. And it's tough. Like the grass is always greener. Like I do this all the time. I was just posting on Instagram, like literally 5 minutes ago about, I really miss home. And it's true. Like I miss my dogs. Yeah. I miss my friends, although I brought lots of them to Germany this week. So, I'm not missing everybody because some of them are here. But like, I miss the stability. I miss the grounding that comes along with being in a place long enough. And everyone will experience that at some point if they travel for a long time. Like you go through that. You really, really miss that. But on the other hand, when I am landlocked in a place and I'm finding myself kind of strapped down to a routine, I start to really miss the freedom and the unpredictable nature of my life that I find when I'm not at home. That moment that we were just talking about where you walk into a room for the first time and you don't you're in this really heightened state. Like I like to operate in that heightened state. And I think the balance is going to change at some point. Like I feel it changing all of the time, and maybe it changes a little bit on an annual basis, and maybe it just changes a little bit over the arc of my life too.
Yeah.
And maybe at some point I won't need as much of what I have now and I'll need more of something else. But yeah, can I share a really ridiculous story?
Totally.
This is a totally ridiculous story that I've shared with like maybe 5 people, but I was in an airport. Surprise! I was in an airport.
That's weird.
It's so weird. I don't know how I found myself there. And I was standing in a line. Weird, because you do that in the airport sometimes for hours. And so this was one of those cases. I was standing in an airport and the guy behind me in line looked like, dude. He was just a regular dude. And he starts chatting to me because I was holding a trapeze, which is always the thing that people ask you about is, well, what's that? But so the guy starts talking to me and he starts asking me about my life because people always want to talk about the circus. It's fun. People love the circus. And so he started asking me these questions and, I started telling him like what my schedule was like. So he's like, oh, do you travel a lot? And I was like, well, so here's what I'm doing this month and next month. And he instead of I usually get the same reaction from people. I usually get this reaction that's like, whoa, that's so cool. You're going to all those cool places. But instead, this guy, because his experience, obviously, in his life is quite different than mine. His life is very different. Like, we're all really different. He looks at me and he goes, oh, wow, it must make it so hard to fall in love. And I was like, insert really long, awkward silence. Right?
A little too close to home for me right now. But...
It's a little too close to home for any of us. Yeah. And I was just like, oh, dagger, right in my heart. And I was like, well, yeah, and that has, that has really sat with me. That has really sat with me for the last 2 months since I kind of randomly encountered this person. Like, obviously I knew that already,
right?
And like, more to the point, I knew that so much that I had designed my life to be that way. Because I was like, maybe not super wanting to find something like that, and based on other things that have happened to me that some people might know about. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to stay really, really busy. I'm going to move around a lot. I'm going to travel a lot, and I'm going to feel so much better. And yeah, that works sort of for a while.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, just keep doing the thing for a while. And it's pretty good. But then like, I definitely I hit a wall. I hit a wall and I'm like, I'm not that person anymore. I'm not in that place anymore. Like, I'm ready for something else. And that's why it's just such a moving target.
Yeah, totally.
Like, your life is just such a moving target. So, yeah. And what makes you happy and what really fills you up is a moving target. And I think that that's when people find themselves getting burned out. In this work, whether you're burned out as a performer, you're burned out as a coach, you're burned out traveling, you're burned out staying at home, you're burned out with whatever, is like, what you need changes, and you just have to assess that.
Well, it's also like I feel like people who are of that personality type, right, who get into circus and have this kind of, where maybe all a bit obsessive, could we say?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so you just go ham on these things, and then you wake up one day and you're like, what is this?
Oh, yeah. You go in like I'm totally that person, 110%. Oh, yeah. You want me to do a thing? 110%. Yeah. Like, there's no gray area.
No.
For me, it's black and white. It's on. The faucet is on or the faucet is off. But that's my. But
the faucet is never dripping.
My faucet never drips. That sounds really bad. /great.
That's going to be the title of this episode, actually. Jenn Bruyer, my faucet never drips.
Yeah, that's embarrassing. Thanks. Yeah, I figured there would be some way that you would embarrass me in front of people I know on this podcast. So
you're welcome.
I'm looking forward to more opportunities for you to do that.
No. We're actually almost out of time. But my last question, well, actually, cool. I want to ask 2 more questions.
Okay.
Is what advice, I ask this to everyone on the podcast, what advice would you give to yourself at the beginning of your circus career?
The advice that I would give to myself at the beginning of my circus career. I think there are a lot of things that I would have told my former self, but maybe the most important thing would be to listen to everyone who went before me. And to not just like ask surface level questions. Oh, what should I do? Like, where should I go? Like those things, like to really ask like the meaningful questions. So in business, we talk a lot about features versus benefits. Like, you sell a product based on the benefit of the product, not the features of the product. And so I think about that a lot in my personal life. I would ask people like, what is it, like, instead of saying, where should I go to circus school? I think, or how do I tour and teach workshops? Like those really black and white feature-based questions. I think what I would really ask people and really listen to is, why do you do this now? And what is it about this that makes you happy? Because if I would have, like, I see a lot, I thought in the beginning, like, you don't know what you don't know until you know it, right?
That's the worst part of it.
Oh, it's totally the worst.
Because if you knew it before you knew it, you could do so much with it.
Yeah. Or you would probably not have done it. Maybe that's the other thing. There's a lot of things that I wouldn't have done. Insert laughter here. But yeah, I think that I would ask a lot more meaningful questions of people who were willing to share information with me. Like, I'm always willing to share information with people. I hate when they ask me the same questions over and over again, those surface level questions. But if somebody came up to me and they were like,
now I'm all paranoid that I'm asking you surface level.
No, your questions are great. They're very leading in the right way.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, you're doing a great job. But I feel like I would have done a better job of asking really good questions and really listening to what people have to say. Yeah. And then I would have done everything else that I did, basically. I would have
rock and roll, man.
Yeah. Like, I made a lot of mistakes and I did a lot of really, really dumb stuff, and I don't regret any of it.
Cool.
Like, I like really did some dumb stuff, you guys. And like, I super don't regret it. And I think I can say that because nothing bad really happened. Right? But no, it's true. It's like nothing bad really happened. Some crap things happen, but nothing really bad happened. And that's the thing that I think we learn as we get older, or we become more experienced with anything, is, and maybe this is how I joke about being pretty existential all the time. Like, oh, nothing really matters. But like, really, I'm like, none of the decisions that I made really mattered. It all kind of like I led myself to the same place, because like, water follows the path of least resistance. Like, that's been the whole path of my life. I do the things that feel good, and if they don't feel good, I change those things. But that's a practice in non-attachment too. Like, there was a day that I woke up and I was like, you know what, performing does not make me happy. And that's quite black and white. There are many performing for money doesn't make me happy. Like, it was making me really miserable. And I was like, but I still love doing this thing, so I'm not going to walk away from this thing. I'm going to figure out a way to do this thing that makes me happy. And that was all I did. It was just water following the path of least resistance. Like, I didn't give it up and I didn't totally walk away. Like, I took a break, for sure. I took a break.
Yeah.
Because it took, just like with anything, it takes you some time to assess those things. Like, you don't just like wake up with all of the answers.
No.
Although sometimes you do, and those days are awesome.
I don't think I've ever had that day in my life, girl. I wish I had a day where I woke up and I was like, these are all the answers.
Well, maybe it's not all the answers, but it's like sometimes I wake up with an answer and I was like,
That's
yes,
cool.
We're still moving forward.
Yeah.
We're still creating
Nice.
meaningful progress and change in our lives. So high five myself and I go about my day. Yeah.
Cool. Jenn, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, man.
So many good things.
Yeah. High five.
That was my interview with aerial coach Jenn Bruyer. Aerial arts has definitely grown as a recreational practice, and there is, as of now, no real codification system or organization in place in the US to standardize aerial coaching. In fact, I don't think there's a place anywhere in the world that standardizes aerial coaching, such that it would exist in gymnastics, for example. Of course, there are teacher trainings. They're done by individuals or aerial companies or aerial studios, but this culture is more like a yoga studio or an individual yoga teacher who offers a training course. There's no governing body or association. I don't really want to address the benefits or drawbacks of this lack of standardization, but what I do want to say is because there's no system, the way that we in the aerial community keep each other safe is via reputation. By knowing who's real, who's been around, and who just happens to have some flashy tricks up on Instagram. Jenn Bruyer, friends, fans, and enemies, is certainly the real deal. One of the biggest takeaways I want to leave you with from this interview was Jenn's belief that teaching or coaching aerial requires a skill set entirely separate from just doing tricks. Yes, of course, you should know how to spot. You should have a working knowledge of rigging and probably know how the tricks you're teaching work. But outside of that, a teacher is someone who practices listening, who can read a room, and who understands the needs of an individual student. To improve as a teacher, you need to experience teaching. So, if you want to take the Jenn Bruyer path as a traveling aerial coach, take some time in a home studio first. Develop your process, your own mental matrices. before embarking on the exciting, hectic, lonely, confusing, thrilling life of a traveling aerial instructor. Which kind of ties into Jenn's piece of advice at the very end. You may want to ask yourself, why do you do this now? And what is it about aerial arts that makes you happy? People ask me, and I'm sure they ask Jenn a lot, what does it take to become a professional aerialist? And I hope that what this podcast is revealing is that a professional aerialist, or any circus professional in this day and age, can mean and do a whole host of things, from perform to teach, to run an entertainment company, to produce podcasts, to give therapy. In order to be really successful, you have to know what about circus arts you love, and beyond that, you have to know what you love outside of circus arts. The answer is different for everyone. If you've been following me for a while on Instagram at _artist_athlete, you know that I was in Germany about 2 months ago, which is when I recorded this interview. I held on to this audio for a while, and I'm not sure quite why I didn't release it yet, but it's actually great that I held on to it so long because it's very timely now to announce that Jenn and I will both be teaching in Texas together. First, we'll be at the Southern Fried Circus Festival in Dallas from September 29th to October 7th. And to get tickets for that, you can go to southernfriedcircusfest.com. And we'll be also road tripping down to Sky Candy in Austin, Texas, to do a week-long intensive for silks and aerial straps. And there's another fabulous aerial coach who will probably be joining us teaching rope. And that's going to be the week of October 8th. You can find out about those at skycandyaustin.com. And I'll put those dates in the show notes as well as the websites for you to reference later. You can follow Jenn Bruyer on Instagram at heelhang and online at www.heelhang.com. I asked Jenn why that was her kind of brand or her name everywhere, and she said it was the first aerial trick she learned was a heel hang. Pretty cool, huh? As always, I am Shannon McKenna. I'm at _artist_athlete or www.theartistathlete.com. If you liked listening to this episode of the podcast, I've got a lot more, and I produce a new episode every single Monday or Sunday if you're a Patreon. To get new episodes, hit subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, whatever platform you're listening on. And if you could leave a rating and review, it does help me out a bunch as well. Thanks so much for listening, guys. I'll talk to you next week.